Good Monday morning, OJA. We're glad that you're here. We're always honored that you guys come and spend your Monday with us. Today, we're going to be talking about the great work that's being done out at Kojak. But first, we're going to talk about the Georgetown Capstone Project, what that means and what it's led to. So, Allison, I'll kick it to you for what's the Georgetown Project?
So, we were selected to be a part of this project, and it really is to focus on our reentry process and where we have come with that, as opposed to where we maybe have lacked with reentry in the past. And so the project really is for us to be able to set some goals and to go through a planning phase with a group of us here within the agency. And then once we get a plan established, and we have until November to get that plan put into place, and we're really going to look at, for that, our goal for reentry is for every youth to go through placement on a reentry plan that's individualized for them and their needs and their family needs, and to have that plan put into place well before, because we know reentry starts the day we take custody of a youth. So to have that plan put into place well before they get ready to return back to the community. And that plan is individualized, like I said, and every part of this process will look the same throughout the state. It doesn't matter what county the youth is from. It doesn't matter what local JSU worker they have. The entire process will be the same process throughout the entire state. So we have until November to get that implemented, that not as a plan. And then our goal is starting in January to actually take that plan and make it come to fruition. And we have 18 months past that to get it all put into place the way that we want it. Georgetown will then evaluate the work that we are doing throughout the process. And after the 18 months, then if we have met the standard for Georgetown, then we would get a certification for the work that we've done.
Right. So Georgetown is in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
And so we sent a team of employees to Georgetown, and we sat with other jurisdictions, other states, and we learned together and then drafted a plan. But during this process, we're not saying that we weren't doing reentry.
Right. What we're saying is that we want it to be a consistent reentry throughout the entire state.
Right. Yeah. And we want to create a process where everybody knows what reentry looks like.
Right. And who's in charge of what? I mean, That's my vision. That's what I see is through every step of it, of the way, is the group home in charge of this part of it? Is the local JSU worker in charge of this part of it? And to have that identified so that there's no guess to it. Or if it falls apart, that plan falls apart, we're not thinking, well, it was somebody else's responsibility. We know exactly who is in charge of what, to be able to move that plan throughout the entire process of that young person's stay within our facilities.
And we've talked about it a little bit before on the podcast. We really want the youth to be able to articulate what their plan is.
Absolutely. And, I think when looking back at the work that I have done as a JSU worker, there were times that I tried so hard to get that young person in a different direction than maybe home. That, in my opinion, home wasn't a good place for them. And so we did all of this stuff for them to go somewhere else, for ultimately the case to be closed and the young person to end up back at home.
So this is going to help all of us be on the same page. All of us, it gives us an opportunity to all come together, and then for the youth to even be empowered to know what all of that means.
Right. Not just the youth, but the family. And,
too.
you know, we've got to figure out a way to get our families to the table.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that COVID did well for us was the ability to be virtual. And, you know, we need to remember that our families that do work, oftentimes if we're asking them to take off work for a Wednesday 1:00 meeting, they don't get paid.
Right.
You know, oftentimes they don't get paid for taking off. And we just need to have the ability to get them to the table, whatever that looks like. And then the other thing I want to say is to look at what family really is. Who do we really need to have at the table? Because, you know, there may be a biological mom and dad, but they may not be the true caregivers of that young person. So if we see the plan from biological mom and dad, it may be completely different needs than, say, grandma that's actually providing the care once that young person returns home.
Right. That's good. And so through all this process, with all this extra work and all this really intentionality around reentry, there was a need for a new position, right? We needed somebody to oversee, direct, create this in many ways. And so we opened up a director's position for reentry.
Yes. And I was named the director of reentry. And I will say it feels a little weird to me. Not because I don't love reentry. I think this is very much a passion and something that I've said has been needed for a while. It's just, you know, that it was me.
So what are some of what do we have to look forward to? What are some of your thoughts?
So I really have a vision that I don't want reentry to be put as a sole responsibility for local JSU workers. I want to have some reentry staff in my vision. And again, this is all going to have to go through and be approved. And, you know, but my vision is that we would have staff that was assigned to each of our group homes or at Kojak. And that person is the one that's driving the bus. You know, that's the captain of the ship. So when meetings need to be scheduled, or we need to get everybody to the table, or the transition plan needs to go from this point to that point, that reentry specialist would be the one that's guiding and making sure, because we've often all done this. We've had grand staffings and we write down who's in charge of what. And then we leave that meeting and we don't go back to that piece of paper until the next grand staffing or the next meeting. And then we're asking, okay, did you do this? Did you get this done? And sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, I forgot. Yeah. Because we, you know, obviously we have other kids on our caseloads that can take our time. But that reentry specialist would be the one to say, hey, I'm going to set a reminder for you for 10 days down the road to check to see if you did X, Y, or Z, or you know, that's kind of my vision on what I see this new division being.
And I think that gives us a central location to communicate information to. Because sometimes it happened that we did that. I've got all of this information outlined. They're like 20 people in that meeting. Who gets it? Like, what do I do with it? I did the work. What's next?
Right.
And so that'll offer clarity.
Yeah. And then just ultimately, at the end of a young person's stay, we want them to feel confident that they know what the next steps are for them, that they can tell us what their reentry plan is, that, you know, my vision is that they walk out of there with a toolkit to say, my local JSU worker is this person, because it may have changed while they were in placement, right? This is how I contacted them. I have a med-manage appointment on this day at this place, and here's the phone number. I want that plan laid out for that young person to where they feel confident. They know walking out of that facility what the next steps are.
And our JSU staff are pathways for all of this. So
Absolutely.
We want our youth to know that if there's a breakdown in any part of this plan, let's say you get to your med management appointment and it was closed, maybe you went on the wrong day. Like, your JSU worker is somebody you can call
Absolutely.
immediately.
Absolutely.
This didn't work out. We want that confidence there, that they're a pathway to help you figure out what the next step is.
Right. And not have to wait until your next meeting with your JSU worker and they ask about it and then they go, oh, well, I didn't go.
Something fell through.
Yeah.
Something happened.
Right.
So I'm excited. I'm excited about where this is going. I'm excited about us all coming together,
Yes.
Bringing in families. We've said it for a long time.
Yeah.
A long time. This gives us a pathway to do that on purpose.
So stay tuned. We will continue building on this process and we'll continue to keep you all in the loop. I will be asking for input from the field. I want to know what you see works and what you think doesn't work. And I know that I want to hear from you on this. So please reach out to me at any time, and we just appreciate you guys staying with us through this process.
Right. And now we'll continue on with the rest of our podcast. All right. We're going to talk today about the music therapy program that's at Kojak and some of our other facilities. So we have Joy here today with us and Tristan. So to start us off, Joy, tell us a little bit about yourself and what is music therapy?
Music therapy is a way of using music to help the client express themselves, learn about themselves. It's a therapeutic tool. It has to be conducted by a licensed professional music therapist who's completed a degree program. It is evidence-based, so that's really important when it's being used as therapy. As far as myself, I was a piano teacher for 20 years and a church music director for part of that time. And I always said to myself, someday I'm going to work in a juvenile center. And nobody believed me. But then when I finished my internship, Kojak called my professor and said they would like to start a program. So she gave them my number, and here we are.
Wow. And so when did this start?
2013, February.
2013. Wow. And so you guys are employees of OJA. It's not a program that comes in.
Right. It started out that way. It was a contract position for almost 2 years, and then they brought me on full time.
What does your workday look like?
Well, I usually work 11 to 8, except for 1 day a week. And I get there about 11, do some notes, do some office work. Sometimes I can squeeze in a session while the youth are on a break from school because they have a 2-hour break to do therapies. And then I usually start with the real heavy sessions around 4, sometimes 3 if there's an opening. But I'm working around all the other therapies too. So, and then I just go as late as I can till I have to be back on unit by 8 for med, and I have to work around medical. So try to get 3 to 4 sessions in a day.
And when you go to sessions, are they able to, do they come to you or do you go to them?
We go pick them up and bring them to us.
And bring them to you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Tristan, tell us a little bit about your role with OJA.
Hello. So my role with OJA is slightly different from what Joy's is. I consistently go to Kojak every Tuesday, but I run group sessions. I do have a group focus. So my groups are typically between 2 to 4 residents. And outside of Tuesdays, I run a level E music therapy program where I am going to different cities in the state, like Lawton, Mustang, Norman, and I'm about to be going to Sallisaw. So what I do with these group homes is I run individual sessions, and
what does that look like at each group home? Are you in the group home like all the time? Is it different?
I rotate between group homes every 3 months.
Okay.
And each facility is a little bit different depending on the directors. They each run their group homes a little differently. We do the first month, they're kind of adjusting to the program. We're kind of getting to know each other. The second month is very treatment heavy, where we are really focusing on those therapeutic goals. And then the last month is talent show and wrapping up their treatment program.
Okay, so you're in Lawton, Norman, Mustang, and you're about to add Salzville.
Yes, that's correct.
And those came on relatively recently. How long have you been with us?
I've been here for about 2 years now. I interned at Kojak for 6 months, and I did a program proposal for the Level E program, and it got accepted. So since then, I've been going between Kojak and the Level E programs doing music therapy.
Okay, so since 2013, there's been roughly 450 youth served, and then bringing in Level E, we're able to capture at least 100 more youth and counting in both places. So tell us a little bit about music therapy and what are some of the things you could accomplish with it.
Well, one of the big goals for me is teaching emotion regulation. So if we think in terms of recognizing you have an emotion, identifying what the emotion is, expressing it in a healthy way, learning to listen to your feelings, and then not letting them run the show. There's kind of 5 little components that I use. So the big ones that we start with is recognizing the emotion and identifying the emotion. And then we kind of go from there. And of course, the other therapies on campus do a lot of that too. So that's really the thing that I do the most, using the music to help them express what's going on with them, find ways to tell and share, maybe with words, maybe without words, and then also find ways to soothe themselves, and also find ways to build healthy connections with others that are not criminal involved, making music with someone else. So those are some of my big goals.
What about you, Tristan? Is it the same, a little bit different?
It's the same. We typically work towards the same direction. A lot of habit replacement, trying to get them into communities that are not the ones that got them in trouble or perpetuated that situation that they landed themselves in. And helping them to mood regulate and identify emotions. Sometimes they have trouble identifying what they are feeling. It usually gets thrown into something like anger or fear. So being able to pick that apart and using music to do that, music with the change of timbre, tempo, dynamics, loud and soft, fast and slow, using that as a reference point to help them to identify what emotions that they are currently experiencing.
So do you feel like youth are generally aware of what they're feeling, or you guys help guide that?
Yeah, we have to help guide it. They can usually say that they're angry, and they can sometimes say that they're afraid. But once in a while, somebody can say, "I'm happy." Sad is a big deal. When somebody admits they're sad, that's a big deal because they're afraid it's going to make them look weak to their peers. So we're trying to build an emotional language as well. And then what does that sound like on the piano? What does that sound like? Let's rap about it. What does it sound like? What does it sound like? And what does it feel like? So yeah, they need some guidance. Yeah.
So what does that guidance look like? Do you guys have some, can you walk us through what that looks like if a youth is like, well, I just don't know how I feel?
Well, I can bring up one example. We had a resident who he wanted to play the piano, but he didn't quite have the patience to actually learn appropriate techniques, and he would just get frustrated and start, hitting the keys because he just wanted to play it so bad, but he didn't want to take the time and work on how to actually play it. So I would get behind the piano, and then he would start to tell me how he would want the music to sound. And I would start with something very minimal, and I would build depending on what he was saying. And the objective was for him to project how he feels through the music. So using the music to express how he feels. And as this progressed further and further, he said it felt like this fog in his brain lifting. unfortunately, whenever that fog lifted, he started freaking out a little bit. He started rocking and putting his hands over his head. And there were some things in that experience that he wasn't quite ready to deal with. But at least we were able to identify it. So the next part of the segment was me using the music to try to reverse what had been done. So I'm adding more chaotic elements in there. I'm kind of trying to bring the fog back down into a place where he can functionally handle what we were working through. And so that was one of the most powerful experiences that I've had, especially when it comes to emotion regulation and expression.
So it sounds like he uncovered maybe depths of emotion that once you got that top layer out of the way, it uncovered some other ones. But then you were able to use music to bring him back to more of a state of normal or rest. Does that sound right?
And he would start playing the piano also, because his way of playing piano was also kind of chaotic. So he would press his hands against the keys, feel the weight of the keys. We also focus on like the tactile part of playing music, especially whenever you have a piano and you have weighted keys, you can feel the vibrations. And so he was pressing down on the keys, playing all these keys at once, kind of helping to create this more chaotic environment versus the one that he directed me to build for him that resulted in the brain fog being lifted.
All right, and they don't need to know how to play instruments.
No, we like them to learn something because it gives them another option, gives them another way to express themselves that they didn't know. And also, when you make music, it's a little different. My understanding is that when you listen to music, it activates and stimulates certain parts of the brain. But when you make music, it stimulates the whole brain. And there's not a lot of activities in the world that do that. I don't know what the other ones are, but music does that. And while that's happening, you get endorphins that make you feel better. So sometimes I've had some that were just so depressive, they didn't want to do anything. And so all I could do was hand them a pair of drumsticks, let's just, and even they were just, not want to play. But sometimes once they get going, you see their mood lift. And it's kind of like getting a runner's high. It's just the same thing. I want to just compliment Tristan if I could.
Go ahead.
The session that he just described, he did that when he was an intern and I was observing. And that was the day I knew you were going to be a fantastic music therapist. And I'm just so proud of where he's come. I'm so proud.
Thank you.
How does that make you feel?
Warm. I mean, it's. I always appreciate the compliments. Whenever I got into Kojak, I pretty quickly knew that that's where I wanted to be, and this is the direction I wanted to go before I even decided to pick a college to go to for this degree. I had my crosshairs on this population, and so hearing that from Joy really kind of reinforces that I'm where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you for that, Joy. We all need encouragement and uplifting, and that was really special. I appreciate that. So we were talking a little bit about do they need to know how to play an instrument, and I wondered, is there some value though in learning, because if you are learning keys or chords, is that distracting the brain from processing?
This is an excellent point, actually. I have a young man who's working specifically on that. As I said, a lot of the time the direction we take is exploring and expressing emotions, and that can be done with improvisation. You don't really have to know how to play. We can give you a few tools to kind of play around. So you get the experience of playing without building a skill. But once in a while I have somebody who really will come in and say, I just want to learn how to do music. Or I just want to play, I want to play this instrument and I want to do it good. And this is a song I want to learn, So we support that as well. I have one young man who comes in, and I just realized this the other night. He is processing emotion all the time. And I spoke with his therapist about that too. And he said, that is exactly right. And so I looked at this young man and I said, what if we make music the time that you can leave all that behind? What if we make music the time that you can take a break from processing emotions? And he just went, I would love that. So I checked it out with his therapist because I didn't want to create a situation where he would be avoiding it, but his therapist agreed that would be the direction we should take. So for him, it's going to all be skill building. It just depends on the client. You know?
So it sounds like there was relief to him.
Mm.
Yes, I would like an avenue other than this constant processing that I have going on.
Yeah.
So, music therapy can help with emotional regulation, and we had talked a little bit about that. Does it help with interpersonal relationships?
I think so. We've had some pretty good experiences. Two different kinds of relationships. One is the therapeutic relationship. And it's a little different at Kojak than like an avenue where you would be doing weekly therapy. And you see the client once a week and then that's it. And then you see them the next week. Well, at Kojak, we see them every day all the time. We see them playing football. We see them, doing whatever their daily activities are. So we have a chance to kind of say, hey, how's it going? Have you been working on that piece we're playing in your mind? You've been singing it, So there's a relationship that's built that's hopefully therapeutic. That's the goal there. And then to have a relationship, like for our young men, to have a relationship with a woman. What does a healthy relationship with a woman look like? What does a healthy relationship with a big brother figure look like? And then also building relationships together. And that really comes from improvising or writing songs together. We do some songwriting too. The most beautiful thing, and this happened way back in the beginning when I was a contractor, when I was still kind of figuring out what we're doing, just let them play together. We have a marimba that someone donated, and we have a glockenspiel, and then we have the piano. If you do all that on the black keys, they can just go to town with that. And sometimes they're resistant. I don't want to play instruments today. I just want to rap, So if we can encourage them, they get lost in it, and they connect in a way that's not gang related. And so sometimes I'll just point that out. I'll say, tell me some ways of healthy connection or of an unhealthy connection. And they'll say, drugs, gang life, negative experiences, And then they'll say, okay, what you just did, you connected through music, and do you think that was healthy? And they're just like, felt so good, So just modeling ways to build relationships and using music as the tool,
That's cool to me.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was about to say there's not very many more things that are more uplifting and encouraging than seeing two young men that are parts of two opposing gangs working together on projects and laughing together. And they're both, they get to know each other, they become a certain level of vulnerable with each other, and seeing the recognition in their eyes that they aren't as different from each other as they originally thought.
That's right. So they get to process, they get to work in groups. I heard you say before, maybe sometimes 2 or 4. And then they get to learn from each other that way. Do they have an outlet? Like they've created something, and now do you guys have talent shows?
Yes.
What does that look like?
At Kojak and Lily, it looks a little bit different depending on the location. The talent shows that I put on at the level E level, it really depends on the environment. All the locations are different, so I will set up as much equipment as I can, fit inside of the performance room. A lot of the times we'll go through the therapeutic material first. Sometimes they're not comfortable sharing things in front of an audience that have this therapeutic significance. So we'll kind of comb through it. They'll still keep their original piece, but we'll decide on what they're going to be sharing with everybody whenever they're on stage. I feel like it is very beneficial to them to be able to play in front of their peers and the staff, and then receive this support from their peers and the staff, being recognized, and their efforts and treatment that they've gone through for the past 3 months being validated through this performance.
So at the close of a talent show, do you notice joy? What is the overall affect?
My favorite thing is seeing them be proud of themselves for doing something good. I mean, just imagine if you've been told your whole life you're a bad person. Look at you, look what you did. Well, you're just always going to be in trouble, probably. How many times have you been locked up, And then you get up and do something unexpected that's completely good, and somebody claps for you. Somebody clapped for me for doing something good. To me, if nothing else happens in the talent show, I've met my goal. That's my goal.
Good. So you guys do continuous learning and other things, right? I think I've seen somewhere you've been to New York. Tell me about that.
Well, New York was fabulous. The training, it was a Nordhoff Robbins training, and Nordhoff was a composer, an American composer, and Robbins was a special education teacher. And they got together and created what is now a method that's been used worldwide. The basic idea is using the ISO principle, which is meeting the client where they're at, and then using the music to expand their horizons. They gave us tools to continue meeting the client where they are. They gave us improvisation tools. We had a chance to look at some recorded sessions, of course, with the client's permission. And then we talked about what we learned in the sessions. For me, the most beautiful thing was seeing people from all over the world play music together.
From Nordhoff Robbins, the whole concept of Nordhoff Robbins is using music as therapy as opposed to using music in therapy. So one of the main concepts as far as like what it looks like in a session is a lot of times there'll be very minimal verbal exchange. It's all musical exchange. So they could come in, there could be total silence, no talking. They go to their instrument, you go to your instrument, and they start playing. And then you meet them musically where they're at. So if they're playing aggressively, you start playing aggressively. And in this musical exchange, you can kind of manipulate through your playing how their playing will go. Once they recognize you as a person who's in the room and you see them and they see you, then it starts becoming this collaborative event that really capitalizes on the interpersonal aspect that you were talking about. So if they're really hyped up and they're angry, they start playing angry, you start playing angry, you slowly kind of decrescendo, like you start going lower key, you start lowering the dynamics, lowering the tempo to be softer and slower until finally it naturally comes to this conclusion, this peaceful conclusion where they're now in a state of mind to engage with treatment.
Yeah, so it sounds like you learn to play off of each other and feed off of what you're doing, and you're able to use music to help teach them that. I think that we could talk about this forever, but we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much for being here. And next, we're going to talk about more of the great work that is happening out at Kojak.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
inviting us.
Welcome back. We are joined here at the table with Carol Miller and Daryl Fields, and we really are wanting to talk about all the great work that is going on at Kojak. And I failed to mention Zoe is also with us. So welcome. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the Barbara Allen Hagen Award that Kojak just received for the 2024 year. Carol, tell us a little bit about what that award is.
So through our participation with the Center for Improving Youth Justice and Performance-Based Standards, we have an opportunity there for the Barbara Allen Hagen Award. And it was established in 2007 to honor Barbara Allen Hagen and her retirement from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, OJJDP.
Yeah.
So she was very much dedicated to improving the quality of life and facilities for youth. And it has really helped drive the PBS data collections and the performance standards to its current success. So it's given annually, once a year, to one facility that best exemplifies the commitment to treating all youth as one of our own.
Right. Which is, as somebody that has placed kids at Kojak, that's what we're looking for, right? We're looking for our kids to be treated the way we want our personal kids to be treated.
Yes.
Yeah. So with this award, how are you all nominated? What does that process look like?
So we write an application,
Okay.
and that application is submitted, and then it is reviewed by a panel that is not involved with CIYJ or PBS.
Right.
It is outside of that entity, and from there, the winners are chosen.
And do you know how many other states or facilities you all were competing against?
There's about 22 states that also participate, so at least 22.
And there's only one award given?
Only one award given each year.
So this is huge, guys. Whenever we're talking about Kojak receiving this award, this isn't something that is just for Oklahoma. It's not something that's, we nominate ourselves and tell everybody how great we are. This is outside entities looking at the work that you all have done at Kojak over a period of years. This change, this culture change that we're going to talk about, didn't just happen overnight. Right. So let's talk about the facility and the improvement plan that you all recognized needed to happen at Kojak and why that was needed. So I'm going to assume those changes started pretty quick after Mr. Fields came on as the superintendent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'll kind of set it up.
Okay.
And Superintendent Fields is really the person who made it all happen. So I'll just kind of set it up.
And
for
then
you.
we're going to kick it to him and let
Yes.
him tell us all about it. Okay.
Yes. So we know we collect our data once every 6 months and compare it to the other states. And so through this data, we see
There's Zoe.
Zoe's snoring, yes. We can see what data, what outcomes, what areas are above the field average of the other participating states. And through that, we create a facility improvement plan. So we knew, here we are, we're right in the middle of building a new facility.
Right.
We're right in the middle of COVID. We have severe staffing shortages, and our youth and staff fear for safety was high. Our assaults and fights were high. And through the data, through the trend analysis and the data and the outcomes, we knew we needed to create a facility improvement plan. So really, Superintendent Fields and the Kojak crew, they got together and they created that facility improvement plan, and he started implementing things that we can do to affect those outcomes.
One of the things that I read was whenever we condensed down to one facility, I think the things that I, as a worker, had taken for granted in the decision making before was the things that the placement unit and then you all as staff looked at, like kids that were in that had participated in offenses together, to being able to separate those into two different facilities. And then as well, if a youth had committed crimes against another youth's family, being able to separate that. But now that we're down to one facility, that is really within the boundaries of Kojak to be able to make sure that those youth are all safe.
Yeah, we really took a restorative justice approach to where the victims get together, and Superintendent Fields does a great job of this, of getting them together and talking it out and making amends. And getting to where they can be with each other. Of course, the hope, being a hope-centered agency, making sure that we create those pathways for the boys, that is all such a big part of it.
And being able to do that within the walls of Kojak, instead of waiting until the youth return back into the communities and having those grudges against each other, being able to make that amends within the walls is huge for our youth to be successful whenever they return back home. So let's talk a little bit then about the practical changes, and I'm going to come over to you, Mr. Fields, and very early on, whenever you were appointed as the superintendent, I heard you talk about the Core 4. So do you mind telling our viewers about the Core 4 and where that came from?
Absolutely. So the Core 4 are a direct result of participating in performance-based standards. And so the Center for Improving Youth Justice, and this is outcome-based information, we were able to look at our April 2021 data collection.
Okay.
And that data collection revealed some very significant information regarding our ability as staff to respect our young men. That's our first R. Our ability to reward our young men, our ability to build good relationships and role model for our young men. And the truth is that the staff and our young men, they agreed.
Right.
And so we asked if our staff were good role models, and the result was 40% yes and 60% no.
Wow.
In the same vein, we had an issue with being able to show respect.
Mhm.
And so is staff respectful of you? And this is all gathered information as part of the staff climate survey and the juvenile climate survey. And they don't agree on a whole lot, but that was very revealing to me. And I had opportunity with our former PBS coach, Russ Jennings, and God rest his soul. But he was very, very insightful in regards to pointing that information out. Now, at that time, I was the state coordinator for PBS, and so I had opportunity to kind of dig down in that information. It became clear as taking on the task as a superintendent that was going to kind of be the steering wheel for how we approach making a cultural change on the campus.
You know, we, like you said, we don't often find that our staff and our kids agree on much, but when they do, we better listen. We need to take that to heart. The other thing is, as most of us who have worked with kids, one of their biggest complaints that they bring to the table is feeling a lack of respect. I mean, within each other, within their families, and then within staff. So to have that as one of your biggest focuses whenever you got there, we have to be good role models, but we also have to show these young men respect. And I think that goes a long way for them to be able to turn around and to say, if this staff is following the same rules, if this staff is respecting me, if we are not on an equal playing field, but we're on a respected playing field, it's easier for them to take feedback.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. And, Allison, we're cut from the same cloth in that regard.
That's right.
And so, I remember working with you as a unit manager, so you know my opinions on that. And so it was good to be able to see that the numbers bore out.
Right. The data, you can't argue with data.
You can't argue with the data.
That's
and
right.
the data supported where I wanted to go. And so in that, we were able to use that information to really not do anything that was profound, but it was very practical.
Right. Right. And I think whenever staff hear it, and your good staff hear it, and they're like, yeah, this is what I've been trying to say.
Right.
It just is easier for people to get on board with that culture change.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I have noticed is our young men, if you're respectful, even when they're disrespectful,
Absolutely.
You're demonstrating for something for them. And it's really a transition. All these things are dovetailed together. They work together. If you're able to be respectful, you begin to build that relationship. You also role model for them. And sometimes you just have to catch young men doing the right thing. He may have sat down
That's right.
for 1.5 seconds.
That's right.
But
That's
he did sit down. Good job.
That's right.
And so rewarding or just giving that positive feedback goes a long way.
So let's shift to your staff and the things that you have implemented for staff and the retention and just the overall mental and physical well-being of your staff.
So we have implemented what I call a leadership academy, and really what it is an onboarding for new staff. It has been integral in regards to making sure our staff understand our vision and mission. And in that, it gives us a great foundation and a launching point for staff who may not have worked in this field, or staff who may come from corrections mindset.
Right.
But we have been able to kind of point them and give them some guidance in regards to understanding this is treatment. And that even though we are dealing with youthful offenders and juvenile delinquents, the intent is to utilize the staff that we have. And we have some great BHCs who are working towards their licensure. Mr. Wilson does an excellent job. Our DBT is the gold standard.
Right.
And so,
We've talked about DBT twice here on the podcast. So, and then our staff in the field now are able to see the training videos so that they can help understand what their young people are learning while they're in the facility, which I think is very innovative. We have not had that in the past. So we are big DBT fans here.
absolutely. And I was just so grateful. We had an opportunity to participate in Washington, D.C. at Georgetown University in a cohort in regards to ending isolation and seclusion.
Right.
And that opportunity presented us with information on DBT. Our leadership team with Carol, they jumped all over it. And it was really the language that we needed to kind of build and give kids the skills that they need to work through, whether it be anger or trauma, And it has been absolutely dynamic in regards to shifting the mentality of some of our kids, because our staff have the language to be able to help them through some difficulty they may be dealing with. And so the other thing that Carol often says, and I found myself doing it last night, is it's insightful for our staff.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and so one of the things that I use a lot is the progressive muscle relaxation, and that's part of DBT.
Right. Right.
And our young men are getting these skills, and oftentimes we had some things in place like a walk and talk,
Right.
but the DBT was able to add and give us some language to feel and to feel that time of discussion. So if they're angry, they can talk about, are you in your emotional mind? Are you in your wise mind? Are you rational mind? And then you can possibly work through, are you dealing, opportunity to use some radical acceptance here work. And so all of those things have really bolstered our ability to deal with difficult circumstances, kids who are escalated. And I've been really impressed by our staff. Our walk and talks went up almost 60%, I believe, during the last year. And we couple that with the ability to be able to discuss, hey, this is an opportunity for maybe to apply this particular skill. And so there are a lot of kudos to be given to a lot of great staff at Kojak, including Mr. Hill,
Right.
Ms. Jaggers, Mr. Castaneda, our unit managers, from Mr. Harvey to I start calling names, I got to call them.
Right.
So
Right.
Mr.
Right.
Union. And it's just some great staff, Ms. Tubbs, who are willing to take that time. And I mean, it can be from those unit managers all the way to our floor staff, and they just do a really good job. And so we celebrate them.
Right.
We celebrate them every week. We have a DBT spotlight, and then we also do a staff spotlight each week. But that DBT spotlight is right out of those walk and talks. And so if we see that they've done an exceptional job pointing that kid to a particular skill, we spotlight them on Thursdays.
So that is pretty amazing. And I think it does also go back to when the youth and the staff are learning the same tool. And that staff member is able to walk that young man mentally through, or physically, emotionally, what they're expressing or dealing with at that time. The hope is that they're eventually, it's like muscle memory. So whenever they get, again, back out on the outside, they can regulate themselves without having to have that, in their ear saying,
Absolutely.
Is this what you're experiencing right now? With the staff making an effort, and then again, it's kind of like a different language. They're having to recognize it themselves to be able to point it out to the youth. And I feel like it all ties together, because if they're not showing respect, then the young person's not going to listen to them. I mean, this has all built on itself.
Absolutely.
And then for a facility, one of the things that you all have to look at is the safety, overall safety. And on the award, the Barbara Allen Hagen Award, one of the things that they highlighted was your data on your restraints or your physical assaults or staff assaults had gone down. What do you attribute all of that to?
All of those core four, those things all work together. It's a lot easier to assault Superintendent Fields.
Right.
It's not as easy to assault Mr. Fields, the guy who helped you get a phone call when you really felt like you needed one because there was something going on at home.
Right.
And so those relationships, those little small things that we are able to do to begin to build those relationships. Obviously, we have to operate within the policy and procedure. But when they see you go out of the way and you're willing to have a conversation with them, those are things that start to build that relationship that we can't always grasp in numbers. But in this particular case, it showed up in the numbers because we were able to show that, hey, if you got a good relationship with them, they're going to maybe think twice before they go somewhere that they would normally go. If you're respectful and calm with them, it'll change the circumstance. And so our staff have bought into the idea, and that is really a kudo to our staff.
Absolutely. Right, because none of this would work without the staff behind us.
Absolutely.
Right, and that brings up one other point too, of the continuous improvement. So
Yes.
it's as our coach Russ Jennings said, it's one thing to change your course, but to maintain that course and to keep moving in a positive way. They've been able to do that for years now.
That's amazing. Yeah. So where do we go from here?
Well, we have a new facility improvement plan, which is part of our PBS. And so we're currently working on our fear for safety.
Okay.
And so fear for safety is a little bit subjective, and it can be a little bit nebulous in trying to pin that down in regards to what makes kids fearful. And sometimes it's just the idea of having to come behind that fence.
Right.
And so it can be a little bit traumatic. Trying to be customer friendly in that regard. And so when our kids arrive at intake, we welcome them. They don't always want to be there, but we want them to know that this isn't all the things that you've heard.
Right.
And so in that, you'll find that there's some great things that happen here. And there's some adversity that seems like it's coming your way. But if you grab a hold of the opportunities, there's opportunity to complete a GED or graduate from high school or get a driver's permit,
Right.
or even work on an OSHA certificate. And so all of those things kind of create that buy-in for our young men. You ought to see some of their face when they leave. Especially I get the opportunity to see them go out the door after signing their paperwork, and I put a wallet in their hands. And I say, hey, you got your driver's license?
Right.
Do you have your birth certificate?
Right.
Do you have your social security card?
Right.
And so with that, you're off to a great start. And so we expect to hear great things from you. And so do the right thing even as you leave this place. And so it is a calling.
Yeah.
It's more
For
than
sure.
work.
For sure. Absolutely. So I always like to end our conversations with facilities as a JSU worker. What can we do? We're going to have probably over 100 workers listening to this podcast. What can we do to assist you all with our young men?
So as a former JSU worker also, come out and talk to us. Come out and visit with the boys, visit with the treatment staff, spend some time with us,
Right.
watch and see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's just showing up, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's one of the things that our boys want more than anything is for people, and their day to day looks the same a lot. So whenever somebody comes to visit, it helps with their routine. So
Yes, they want someone to listen to what they have to say.
Absolutely.
absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us on the podcast. It wasn't as bad as you thought it was going to be, right?
Right.
And then I would like to give a shout out to the staff at Kojak. We appreciate the work that you all are doing. We know that it is hard work. It's probably the hardest work we do within our agency with our young men. And we just wanted to look at you and say, we see you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you all stay with us for a long time.
Central Oklahoma Juvenile Center is in Tecumseh, Oklahoma. We are a 112-bed facility. Our residents generally are 13 to 19 years of age.
In 2016, all of our buildings were over 100 years old. All windows were painted. There was no natural light. None of the kids had a single room. They all stayed in dormitories with a day room. It was very challenging. So the legislature funded us with a bond money. The vision was to build a facility that was conducive to treatment. So natural lighting, therapeutic colors, and individual rooms so that they would have alone time to think about what they had just learned in treatment.
So a lot of our youth having their own room, it's theirs. It makes them feel safe, makes them feel comfortable. A lot of them, this is the first time that they've ever had anything to themselves.
The rebuilding of the buildings was a great start, but we needed programming to match the excellence that was coming out of these buildings. And so we had some areas that certainly could use some improvement. How we build relationships, how we reward our young men, our ability to respect our young men, as well as the ability to role model for those young men. And during our April data collection, 2021, the numbers showed that both staff and our residents agreed that we were struggling in each of those areas.
And so when kids are scared, they're going to act out. So we created a facility improvement plan focused on assaults and fights.
And that kind of began to shape the core for what it is we do today. When that young man realizes that you have their best interests at heart, it almost quells some of those escalating situations because they know that you have what I would call a unconditional positive regard for them.
I have good interaction with all my staff. They really just make sure that we're motivated and keep us on track. They actually care. They want us to do better.
The walk and talk is just a method that it's worked. When a youth is upset and they just need a moment to themselves, we give them that opportunity. And you'll be amazed at how calm a kid can be within 15 minutes talking to a staff that he kind of has a positive relationship with.
It's almost like flipping a switch where they're so emotional and then they say, oh, let me think this thing through.
Last April, we were able to begin training the clinicians on dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT. DBT has been essential to help the residents here. Typically, any adolescent struggles with emotion regulation. And so being able to have the skills to manage that can go into the rest of their life.
We have Hope Navigators that come on our campus at least once a month. And so they talk to our young men and our staff about your tomorrow can be better than your today. And so being able to have that conversation is really impactful for our young men. Hope is a cognition, it's not a wish.
Winning the Barbara Allen Hagen Award, not just once, but now for a second time, there's confirmation and validation there, and what we're doing and the process we've gone through is working.
It works, these things work. And we want to share that with other jurisdictions that have all these challenges.
It solidified our executive team as leaders. The direction that we're heading in is the right direction. One of our board members, he says, you may have done what they said you did, but you're not who they say you are.
Youth placed at Kojak, this is not a consequence for them. This is a pathway of hope for them. The giving back in my life to these youth and to the staff, that's my fulfillment. Because I see the impact, and I see the impact that it'll be for future generations. I'm almost made me cry.
My future, I feel like I'm gonna be successful. I'm gonna actually be able to get out and stay on track. Just being able to be back with my family and actually be able to start up my business and actually work on doing a better future.
And I know, even for the boys who struggle, that seed has been planted and that one day they'll probably be telling their children, because we're going to impact generations of the future.